Three young men thought it would be funny to push around an elderly veteran with a walker until Navy SEALs showed up at their door. What started as cruel entertainment on a quiet Tuesday afternoon turned into a nightmare that would haunt them forever. Within 2 hours, their names were trending on social media, their faces were plastered across the evening news, and their families were issuing public apologies to a war hero they had never heard of. The video of their prank had gone viral, but not in the way they expected. Instead of likes and laughs, they got death threats and disgrace. Their high school expelled them, their part-time jobs fired them, and their own neighbors crossed the street to avoid them. All because they decided to target the wrong 82-year-old man on the wrong day in the wrong neighborhood. They thought Harold Peterson was just another helpless old guy they could push around for kicks. They had no idea he was a decorated Vietnam veteran whose military brothers never forgot their own. And when those brothers found out what happened to Harold, they made sure the entire world knew exactly what kind of cowards pick on elderly heroes. Sometimes justice comes through the courts. Sometimes it comes through social media. But when you mess with a Navy veteran, justice comes in the form of SEALs who never leave a man behind, even 50 years after the war ended. Tuesday mornings in Millbrook were predictably quiet. The small Pennsylvania town moved at the pace of its oldest residents, which suited Harold Peterson just fine. At 82, he had learned to appreciate the slow rhythm of life, the way sunlight filtered through maple trees, and the familiar comfort of routine. Every Tuesday at exactly 10:30 a.m., Harold would begin his weekly journey to Peterson's pharmacy. No relation, though he'd been making the same joke to the pharmacist for 12 years. The walk from his small apartment on Elm Street to the pharmacy on Main Street was exactly 6 blocks each way. For most people, it would take 15 minutes. For Harold, with his aluminum walker and the shrapnel still lodged in his left leg from a Viet Cong mortar attack in 1969, it took 45 minutes each direction. But he didn't mind. The walk was more than just a necessity. It was his connection to the world, his proof that he was still here, still mobile, still independent. Harold had never been the type of veteran who wore his service on his sleeve. His modest apartment contained no flag displays, no shadow boxes full of medals, no photographs of him in uniform. The only hint of his military past was a small wooden box on his nightstand that contained his Purple Heart, Bronze Star, and a folded flag that had draped his best friend Tommy Martinez's coffin in night. Harold preferred it that way. He had served his country, done his duty, and come home when too many of his brothers hadn't. That was enough. This particular Tuesday started like any other. Harold had his breakfast, black coffee and toast with strawberry jam, read the local newspaper, and checked the weather. It was a crisp October morning, perfect for walking. He put on his brown cardigan, the one his late wife Eleanor had knitted for him 20 years ago, grabbed his wallet and picked up his walker. The first 5 blocks went smoothly. Harold nodded to Miss Chen as she watered her flowers, waved to young Tommy Sullivan who was loading equipment into his landscaping truck, and paused to pet old Rex, the German shepherd who always waited by the corner mailbox for his daily scratch behind the ears. These small interactions were the highlights of Harold's week. Simple human connections that reminded him he was part of a community. As Harold turned onto Main Street for the final block to the pharmacy, he noticed 3 young men loitering outside the convenience store. They appeared to be in their late teens, maybe early 20s, with the kind of restless energy that often accompanied youth and too much free time. Harold didn't think much of it. Young people had always gathered on street corners, and Millbrook had always been a safe town. The first young man was tall and thin with bleached blonde hair and multiple facial piercings. His name was Derek Matthews, though Harold had no way of knowing that. Derek had dropped out of high school 6 months earlier and spent most of his days creating content for social media platforms, hoping to achieve internet fame through increasingly outrageous stunts and pranks. The second was shorter, but more muscular, with numerous tattoos covering his arms. This was Jake Wilson, Derek's best friend since middle school, and eager participant in whatever scheme Derek devised. Jake worked part-time at a local auto shop, but spent most of his mental energy planning his next viral video opportunity. The third young man was Marcus Chen. Yes, Miss Chen's grandson, though Harold didn't make the connection. Marcus was the newest member of their group, a recent high school graduate who had fallen in with Derek and Jake over the summer. Unlike his friends, Marcus came from a good family and had generally stayed out of trouble, but he was eager to fit in and prove himself to his new companions. As Harold slowly made his way down the sidewalk, his walker making a distinctive metallic clicking sound with each step, Derek nudged his friends and pointed. "Check out Grandpa over there," he said, pulling out his phone and opening his camera app. "Bet I can get some good content out of this." Jake grinned. "What are you thinking?" "Just watch and learn," Derek replied, positioning his phone to record as he approached Harold. Harold was about 30 feet from the pharmacy entrance when Derek stepped directly into his path. "Excuse me, sir," Derek said with exaggerated politeness, his phone recording everything. "I was wondering if you needed some help with that walker. You're moving pretty slow there." Harold looked up, mildly confused by the interaction. "No thank you, son. I'm doing just fine." "Are you sure?" Derek pressed, moving closer. "Because it looks like you're having some trouble. Maybe you should be in a nursing home instead of wandering around the streets." Jake and Marcus began laughing, clearly enjoying their friend's performance. Harold's expression remained calm, but something in his eyes shifted. He had encountered bullies before in school, in the military, and in life, and he recognized the dynamic immediately. "I appreciate your concern," Harold said quietly, "but I'm just trying to get to the pharmacy. If you'll excuse me." Harold attempted to maneuver around Derek, but the young man stepped sideways, blocking his path again. "Actually, I don't think I will excuse you," Derek said, his voice taking on a nastier edge. "This is a public sidewalk, and you're moving too slow. You're blocking traffic." "There's no traffic," Harold observed calmly, "and I have every right to use this sidewalk." That's when Derek made his first serious mistake. He reached out and grabbed Harold's walker, giving it a sharp shake. "Maybe you need to move a little faster, old man." Harold's grip tightened on the walker handles. 53 years after Vietnam, his instincts were still sharp. He could feel the situation escalating, could see the predatory gleam in the young man's eyes, could sense that this was about to get much worse. "Please let go of my walker," Harold said, his voice steady but firm. Derek laughed and shook the walker again, harder this time. "Or what? You're going to fight me? You can barely stand up without that thing." Jake stepped forward, emboldened by his friend's aggression. "Yeah, what are you going to do, Grandpa? Call the cops?" Marcus, caught up in the momentum and eager to impress his friends, added his own taunt. "Maybe we should take that walker away and see how tough you really are." But what happened next would change everything, because Harold Peterson wasn't just any 82-year-old veteran. He was a former Navy SEAL whose service record was classified at the highest levels. Harold had served 3 tours in Vietnam as part of a covert special operations unit. His missions had taken him deep into enemy territory, where he had rescued captured American soldiers, disrupted supply lines, and conducted reconnaissance that saved countless lives. He had earned his Purple Heart when shrapnel from a mortar round had torn through his leg during a firefight that lasted 18 hours. He had earned his Bronze Star for carrying 2 wounded teammates to safety under heavy enemy fire. More importantly, Harold was part of a brotherhood that never forgot its own. Derek's, still filming with his phone, decided to escalate things further. "You know what? I think this old guy needs to learn some respect for his better." He pushed the walker hard enough to send Harold stumbling backward. Harold managed to catch himself, but the message was clear. These young men weren't just being rude, they were being violent. And in Harold's experience, violence against the elderly rarely stopped at one push. "That's enough," Harold said, his voice carrying a new authority that made all 3 young men pause momentarily. But Derek was too caught up in performing for his phone camera to recognize the warning. "Did you just tell me what's enough?" "I don't think so, old man." With that, Derek grabbed the walker with both hands and gave it a violent jerk, sending Harold tumbling to the sidewalk. The 82-year-old veteran hit the concrete hard, his cardigan tearing and his hands scraping against the rough surface. For a moment there was complete silence. Then Derek, Jake and Marcus began laughing, the cruel, mindless laughter of bullies who had found an easy target. "Look at him," Derek said, still recording, Can't even stay on his feet. This is going straight to TikTok. Harold lay on the sidewalk for several seconds, not because he couldn't get up, but because he was making a decision. At 82, with a body worn down by age and old wounds, he could try to get up and fight three young men who were clearly looking for trouble. Or he could do something else. Harold slowly pulled his old flip phone from his cardigan pocket. The three young men were still laughing and high-fiving each other, completely unaware that Harold was making a call that would change their lives forever. "Tommy?" Harold said when someone answered. "It's Harry Peterson. I need a favor." The voice on the other end was Tommy Martinez Jr., son of Harold's best friend who had died in Vietnam. Tommy Jr. was now 52 years old and happened to be a command master chief in the Navy SEALs. "Harry, are you okay? You sound like you're on the ground." "I'm fine, Tommy, but I'm lying on a sidewalk in downtown Millbrook because three young men thought it would be funny to attack an old veteran." There was a pause. When Tommy Jr. spoke again, his voice had changed completely. "Give me your exact location." Harold provided the address while Derek continued filming, now narrating for his video audience about how hilarious it was to see old people fall down. "Tommy," Harold continued, "these boys are recording this whole thing. They seem to think attacking elderly veterans is entertainment. Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious. But Tommy, these aren't just kids being kids. They're dangerous." "Harry, stay on the line. Help is already on the way." What Harold didn't explain, and what Derek, Jake, and Marcus couldn't possibly have known, was that Tommy Martinez Jr. was currently stationed at Naval Special Warfare Command and had immediate access to a quick reaction force that was training just 40 minutes away. As Harold ended his call and slowly worked his way back to his feet, Derek was still recording and providing commentary for his social media audience. "This is what happens when old people try to act tough," Derek said to his phone camera. "Sometimes you just have to put them in their place." Jake and Marcus were still laughing, completely oblivious to the fact that Harold's phone call had just triggered a military response that would arrive with overwhelming force. Harold managed to get back to his feet and check his walker for damage. It was still functional, though one of the rubber tips had been scraped off in the altercation. "You boys have made your point," Harold said quietly. "I suggest you move along now." Derek stepped closer, emboldened by Harold's apparent helplessness. "Actually, I don't think we're done here. This is too good for just one video." That's when Derek made his second serious mistake. He pushed Harold again, this time hard enough to send the elderly veteran against the brick wall of the convenience store. "Stop!" The voice came from Mrs. Patterson, the pharmacy owner, who had witnessed the entire incident from her window and had come running outside. "What is wrong with you?" "He's an old man." Derek turned his camera toward Mrs. Patterson. "Mind your own business, lady. We're just having some fun." "I'm calling the police," Miss Patterson said, pulling out her phone. "Go ahead," Jake taunted. "By the time they get here, we'll be long gone." But what none of them realized was that the police would be the least of their problems. Exactly 47 minutes after Harold's phone call, the sound of helicopters began echoing through the streets of Millbrook. At first, residents assumed it was just routine military training from the nearby base. But as the sound grew louder and closer, people began stepping outside to see what was happening. Derek, Jake, and Marcus were still harassing Harold when the first Black Hawk helicopter appeared over Main Street. Then a second, then a third. "What the hell?" Derek said, lowering his phone for the first time since the incident began. The helicopters circled once, then began landing in the parking lot behind the convenience store. Within seconds, Navy SEALs in full tactical gear were pouring out of the aircraft and surrounding the area. Harold smiled for the first time that morning. "Boys," he said calmly, "I'd like you to meet some friends of mine." The first SEAL to reach the group was Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a man whose physical presence commanded immediate respect. He was followed by 11 other members of SEAL Team 2, all armed, all focused, and all very unhappy about what they had been told regarding Harold Peterson. "Are you Harold Peterson?" Rodriguez asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Yes, Chief. Thank you for coming." Rodriguez nodded, then turned his attention to Derek, Jake, and Marcus, who were now standing frozen in terror as they found themselves surrounded by some of the most elite warriors in the American military. "Which one of you thought it would be fun to assault a Navy veteran?" Rodriguez asked, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made grown men confess their sins. Derek's hand was still holding his phone, the camera still recording, but he seemed to have forgotten how to speak. "I said," Rodriguez repeated, stepping closer. "Which one of you put your hands on this veteran?" Jake, whose earlier bravado had completely evaporated, pointed a shaking finger at Derek. "It was him. It was all him. Is that..." Rodriguez looked at Derek with the kind of stare that had intimidated enemy combatants in dozens of countries. "You thought an 82-year-old veteran was a good target for your entertainment." Derek finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. It was just a prank." "A prank?" Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Master Chief Martinez, would you like to explain to these young men what kind of prank they just pulled?" Tommy Martinez Jr. stepped forward, and Harold's face lit up with genuine warmth. "Tommy, you look just like your father, Mr. Peterson. It's an honor to see you again. Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious, son, but these boys seem to think attacking veterans is amusing." Tommy Jr. turned to Derek with an expression that could have melted steel. "Do you have any idea who you just assaulted?" Derek shook his head, still clutching his phone. "This is Harold Peterson, Navy SEAL, 3 tours in Vietnam, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, and more classified missions than you could imagine. He's done more for this country in one day than you'll accomplish in your entire worthless life." The color had completely drained from Derek's face. Jake and Marcus looked like they were about to be sick. But the real shock was still coming, because word of the incident was already spreading through military networks, and Harold Peterson's service record was more extraordinary than even he had ever revealed. Rodriguez received a message on his radio and listened intently. His expression grew even more serious as he absorbed the information. "Mr. Peterson," Rodriguez said, "I've just been informed that you're not just any veteran. According to Navy records, you're Harold Ghost Peterson, SEAL Team 1, with more confirmed enemy kills than any operative of your generation." Harold looked embarrassed. "Chief, that was a long time ago. Respect doesn't have an expiration date, sir." Derek's phone, which had been recording everything, finally slipped from his trembling hands and clattered to the sidewalk. The impact cracked the screen, but the device kept recording, capturing every moment of what would become the most watched military response video in Internet history. "You're under citizen's arrest for assault," Rodriguez informed Derek, "but before we turn you over to local authorities, I want you to understand something. This man you attacked, he's saved more American lives than you'll ever know. He's a hero, and you're a coward who picks on elderly people for social media content." By now a crowd had gathered. Millbrook residents, store owners, and passing motorists all stood watching as Navy SEALs defended one of their own. Several people were recording with their phones, and within minutes, videos of the incident would be uploaded to every major social media platform. Mrs. Patterson approached Harold with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Peterson, I had no idea you've been coming to my pharmacy for 12 years, and I never knew you were a war hero." Harold patted her arm gently. "I'm not a hero, Margaret. I'm just an old man who did his job." "With respect, sir," Rodriguez interjected, "you're much more than that." The local police arrived 20 minutes later, though by then the SEALs had everything well in hand. Sheriff Williams, a 30-year veteran of law enforcement, had never seen anything quite like the scene on Main Street. "Master Chief Rodriguez," Sheriff Williams said, "I appreciate you responding, but we can handle this from here. Actually, Sheriff, we'd like to see this through. Mr. Peterson is family to us." Sheriff Williams looked at Harold with new eyes. "Mr. Peterson, I've known you for 12 years. Why didn't you ever mention your military service?" Harold shrugged. "Never seemed relevant, Sheriff. I was just trying to live quietly." Derek, Jake, and Marcus were officially charged with assault, disturbing the peace, and elder abuse. But their legal troubles would be the least of their problems. The video Derek had been recording on his phone automatically uploaded to his social media accounts, where it was immediately seen by his. But instead of the laughs and likes he had expected, the response was swift and brutal. Within 2 hours, The hashtag Justice for Harold was trending nationally. Derek's full name, address, school and employer were posted online. His family's business received thousands of negative reviews and angry phone calls. His high school issued a statement condemning his actions and noting that he was no longer a student there. Jake lost his job at the auto shop within 4 hours of the video going viral. Marcus was expelled from the community college where he had just started his freshman year. But perhaps the most powerful response came from the veteran community itself. Harold's story was shared on veteran forums, military Facebook groups, and veteran support networks across the country. Donations began pouring in to support Harold, though he politely declined all monetary offers and asked that contributions be directed to veteran housing programs instead. 3 weeks after the incident, Harold received a letter from the Secretary of the Navy, thanking him for his service and informing him that he was being awarded the Navy's highest civilian honor for his lifetime of service and sacrifice. The ceremony was held in Millbrook's Town Square, with Navy officials, local dignitaries, and hundreds of residents in attendance. Tommy Martinez Jr. presented the award personally, and Harold finally received the public recognition that his classified service record had never allowed. Derek, Jake, and Marcus were sentenced to community service at the local VA hospital, where they spent 6 months helping elderly veterans with daily tasks and listening to their stories. It was a humbling experience that none of them would ever forget. Derek eventually issued a public apology video, though by then his social media career was permanently over. He used the experience as a wake-up call, eventually enrolling in community college and volunteering at veteran support organizations. Jake found new employment at a company owned by a veteran who believed in second chances but made it clear that any disrespect toward military personnel would result in immediate termination. Marcus transferred to a different college but continued to volunteer with veteran organizations, saying that meeting Harold had taught him the true meaning of service and sacrifice. Harold continued his Tuesday walks to the pharmacy, though now he was often accompanied by neighbors who insisted on joining him. The town installed a bench halfway between his apartment and the pharmacy, with a plaque that read, "In honor of Harold Ghost Peterson and all veterans who served with courage and humility." When Harold passed away at age 85, his funeral was attended by Navy personnel from across the country, along with Derek, Jake, and Marcus, 3 young men whose lives had been forever changed by their encounter with a true American hero. The lesson of Harold Peterson lived on, that respect is earned through service, that heroes often walk among us unrecognized, and that true strength is shown not in how we respond to those who can defend themselves, but in how we treat those who appear vulnerable. This story reminds us that our veterans deserve respect, not ridicule. They served so we could live in freedom, and the least we can do is treat them with the dignity they've earned. If you believe our elderly veterans deserve better, hit like, type respect in the comments, and subscribe to honor their memory, because some uniforms never come off, and some debts can never be repaid.